Well, the weather's awful outside, it's tipping down, and it's a good excuse, a good opportunity for me to come into the fishing shed and do a bit of rig making. Now we've come into a time of year, March, where I like to think about doing a bit of drift fishing for plaice, and it's one of my favourite forms of fishing. You sit back in the kayak there, hopefully in good weather, with a couple of rods out, dragging the bait along the bottom, just waiting for that rod tip to rattle where the plaice has picked up the moving bait. So what I thought I'd do this season is show you some of the rigs that I use for the various types of fishing. And even though I know there are hundreds of videos out there on YouTube and hundreds of websites around the world that show all the different rigs that we use for sea fishing, I'm going to show you the rigs that I use so that when I make the proper fishing videos, I can refer you to those videos, particularly for those of you that are fairly new to kayak fishing or sea fishing in general. And I do get questioned quite a lot about the rigs that I use on the video. So we're going to start a little series, I suppose, here in the fishing shed and do a bit of rig making as I go through the season. Going to do the different types of fishing. I'll have a look at the rigs and how I make the rigs up. Right, looking at making up the plaice rig that I like to use for my drift fishing, and there's plenty of plaice rigs out there, but the one I use is very, very simple, and it just consists of a swivel. I've got some 30-pound fluorocarbon, I've got some coloured beads, and I've got a 1/0 fine wire hook. And I start the rig off by cutting off about 4.5 feet of the fluorocarbon, and then to one end of the fluorocarbon tying the swivel on with what is known as a uni knot. Now a uni knot is a very common knot, so I'm not going to go into how to tie a uni knot. There's plenty of websites out there, videos and websites that do show you how to tie a uni knot, and there's one particular website that I can really recommend, and I think it's called, pretty sure it's called Net Knots, and it's absolutely brilliant, and it's got just about every knot on there that is used around the world for fishing, so I can thoroughly recommend it, and it's a site that I've used an awful lot when I wanted to learn new knots. But just going to tie this swivel on using the very, very common uni knot. Okay, got the swivel tied on with the uni knot, but if you notice there, I've left about 1/4 inch tag end, and that's just a little bit of security just in case the knot slips a little bit. What we're going to do next is thread these beads on, but before I do that, I'll talk about the reason for using beads. That's for those of you that have never done plaice fishing before. Basically, plaice are said to like a bit of bling, a bit of colour. It's an attraction to them. They like movement, hence the fact that drift fishing for them is a very good way of fishing for them because it adds that movement. But basically, the plaice, they bury themselves down under the sand with just those sort of little eyes that stick upwards out of the sand, just waiting for the prey to pass by, and then they come out and pounce on it. So movement is very, very good. But like I said, it is also said that colour, they're attracted to colour. Now, I like to use just beads. Some people use beads and they use little spoons, coloured spoons or silver spoons, spoons that maybe flutter like that, or spoons that rotate when the bait is dragged along the bottom. But I've found that just using a few coloured beads is enough, and don't usually bother adding add in spoons as well. But again, that's down to personal choice and personal experience of how successful you've been using these different things. But also talking about colour, lots of different colour combinations that I've tried in the past, but the one that I've found that works the best is, for some reason, is black and green. Quite why that is, I'm not sure. Some people say that they're attracted to black because they think they're the tiny little baby mussels. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I've had the most success using black and green, but I've also had success using other colour combinations, and to be honest, it pays to experiment and see what happens to be working on the day. But black and green is the one that I usually go for. So what I'm going to do, I've got 10 beads there, 5 of each. I'm going to thread them on, green, black, and then we'll look at tying the hook on. Okay, got my 10 beads on there, and now it's a matter of tying the hook on to the other end of the fluorocarbon. But once again, what I'm going to use is a uni knot. Got the hook tied on there with the uni knot. Now, before I cut this tag end down, I'll talk a bit about one of the reasons I like using a uni knot, particularly when I'm fishing with bait, is that if you notice there with the uni knot, the tag end points backwards up the trace. So if I cut that back to about 1/4 of an inch, you can see there it's clearly pointing backwards. Now that is really useful when you're using bait, particularly worms, but not just worms, maybe strips of squid or strips of mackerel, because you thread your worm on and up the trace a little bit, and then because this is pointing backwards, it acts as a little stop there to stop, and can go some way to stopping the bait or the worm sliding back down on the hook in a bunch. So yeah, so apart from the fact that I find the uni knot a really good, strong, reliable knot, there's another reason for using it. Well, that's it. That's my rig almost complete, but there's one last thing I've got to do, and that is to tie on a sliding stop knot on the main trace line here. I believe out in the States you call it a bobber stop knot, sliding bobber stop knot. We called it a sliding stop knot. And the reason for that is to keep everything, the beads and the bait, nice and contained down the business end, and stop the whole thing flying up the line. So just going to tie the stop knot round about there, but of course, being a sliding stop knot, it is adjustable, can be pushed down, or it can be, or you can slide it back up again to suit. I made a video last year and it was called Float Fishing for Mackerel, and the rig I used in that video involved using a sliding stop knot, and afterwards I was contacted by a few viewers who were interested in that knot because basically they were not familiar with it. Now, although that knot, like many others, it is out on the internet, and it's on that site that I recommended, Net Knots, but it may go under the name of the sliding bobber knot. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to attempt to show you how to tie that knot. So what I've done is I've cut about 1 foot of the same line that I'm using for my trace line here, and when I tie a sliding knot, I like to use the same diameter line as the trace line that I'm tying it to. But basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to place the stop knot line alongside the trace line there, and then taking one of the tag ends, I'm going to fold it over the opposite side, and then just hold it there so it forms a loop over the main trace line. This is the trace line. And then what I'm going to do is take one of the tag ends of the stop knot line, and what I've got to do, I've got to put it through this loop here, and then over the top, and then back through the bottom loop, and then over the top, and do that 4 times. Now the more times you do it, the tighter stop knot will be. The less times, the more slippery it will be. But what I find, about 4 times works well for me. Gives me about the right tension. So I'm going to take this tag end and then through the loop there, over the top, back through the loop, over the top, back through the loop, over the top, and finally the 4th time back through the loop and over the top. And then give it plenty of lubrication using saliva, and that, with the lubrication there, when you tighten the knot up, it will help it to slide easily and create less friction. So I've got my 2 tag ends of my stop knot line, and then I'm just going to tighten that up, and you can see that there, that's just tightening up lovely around the trace line. And then I'm just going to cut these tag ends down, and just going to leave it a little bit, not cut it too tight like that. If you cut it too tight, this knot can unravel easily. So just leave a bit of a tag end there, and then the other side there. And there we've got our stop knot, which of course can slide either down or up, and there's enough tension there to hold, plenty of tension to hold, but loose enough for me to move it either up or down. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to slide it down to about there, and what that will do, it'll give me a bit of a gap here, so if I want to slide the bait, maybe worms or even a bit of squid or a bit of mackerel up the trace line here, I've got the room to do it. But as I said, the main thing is that it keeps everything nicely contained down the business end. Well, that's it. That's the rig I use for my drift fishing for Plaice, and all I've got to do now is make up a few more of these. But what I thought I'd do is show you how this all fits together on the rod. So what I've got coming down from the rod tip, I've got my leader. In this case it's a 30-pound leader, and what I've done, I've slid a boom onto the leader, and that's to hold the lead and of course to help to prevent tangles. And then in between the boom and the trace swivel, I've got a bead, and that helps to protect the knot on the swivel. And then of course the trace itself. But talking about the lead that is quite good to use when you're fishing for Plaice or other flatfish, including turbot, is one of these leads, which is known as a watch lead. And if you notice there, it's got those bumps. And the idea is that when you're drifting along on your kayak, this is being dragged along the seabed, and these little bumps help to kick up a bit of sand, a little bit more than maybe an ordinary lead will. I mean, an ordinary lead is absolutely fine, it will still kick up a bit of sand. But that kicking up of a bit of sand is an added attraction to maybe a Plaice nearby who sees that puff of sand and thinks maybe it's a sand eel or a small crab coming out of the sand. And then hopefully we'll find your bait down at the business end. Well, weather permitting, in the next couple of months, I'm hoping to get out there and do a bit of Plaice fishing, and hopefully you'll see this rig catching a few of those nice flatties. Well, I'm going to make myself a cup of tea now. So once again, particularly for those of you that are fairly new to this type of fishing, once again, I hope you found that useful, and many thanks for watching.